begin just by saying a word or two about Nancy. We've known each other since probably somewhere in the late 90s. And to make a long story short, Nancy had her origins kind of with Catholic worker movement and developed what she, a real passion for, quote, the poor, for people um, who are being oppressed by so many needs. And out of that developed the Inner City Law Center, uh, which she can tell us a little bit about if she likes. And from that, also Uncommon Good, based in Claremont, which, why don't we just start with uh, a little bit about Uncommon Good? I referred everybody uh, to the wonderful interview that you had on Claremont Speaks, and I think we are mostly familiar with that. The people on Facebook may not be, but I'll include the link there where they can look it up if they wish. But tell us just, what's going on right now with Uncommon Good?
Wow. Well, we got really busy during the pandemic, Tom, because we stayed open, during that time and added new programs. So, our longstanding programs, this is our 21st year, are our education and mentoring program, where we start working with underprivileged children, mostly from immigrant families, in the fourth grade, and then help them succeed in school and aim for college and then get into college, to get that education to break that intergenerational cycle of poverty. And then we also have a program that supports young doctors who want to work in underserved communities throughout the Southland, and we help them pay off their sky high student loans so that they can accept jobs in basically in the free clinics of the area. And um, dating back to the last recession, we also have an urban farm program where we hire the parents of the children in our education program to grow organic fruits and vegetables so that the families in our program can have the kind of healthy food that they otherwise couldn't afford. This last year, we fed over 6,000 people through that program. And then more recently, since the pandemic, we've added a and very interesting, first in the United States, global pilot project for mental health, which is a huge need and grew ever more so during the pandemic. And we've never had, the sufficient resources to address mental health needs in our communities. So it's very exciting to be the site of this pilot. We also expanded our farm program to include a food pantry where we can give away non-perishable food as well as the fresh produce to people. So those are some of the things that have been going on. Oh, we have another program to address the needs of dyslexic students. 1 in 5 students is estimated to have a learning disability, and the most common is dyslexia. And if you're dyslexic, you're not going to be able to learn to read the way reading is currently taught in our schools. And, if your parents are educated, they'll realize something's wrong and they'll get you the help that you need. But if you're poor and your parents don't have an education, you don't get that help, and you fail in school and then you fail in life. So I think this is a social justice issue, that we recognize learning disabilities among low-income students and address them. So we've begun to do that as well. So those are some of the things on the plate at the
Mhm,
moment.
mhm. I've always thought it is just absolutely marvelous the way that you sort of look into the cracks to discover the needs. You look into you're very, very aware of um, what is falling through the cracks and who are falling through the cracks. And that you to me, you just have an uncanny way of zeroing in on that. And your comment might be, well, it's so obvious, people just have to open their eyes to see it. And I would suspect you're right. or at least that's where I'm putting words in your mouth. But uh,
Well, I think Tom, actually, it's not me looking, it's the community speaking. The community has a voice in creating and running our programs, and so we just follow their lead. We have a parent leadership group and a student leadership group, and they're actually very vocal and very clear about the things that they need and what
mhm,
needs to be done. So it's a pretty simple matter of just following their lead and trying to work with them to create answers to these problems. So, um,
the
yeah.
problem is most of us don't hear or listen.
Right.
Well, most people perhaps aren't in a position to cross paths so regularly
Mm,
with folks in that socioeconomic group. So you
mhm,
you kind of have to be in a certain place or engaged in certain activities, or you're right, you don't hear that voice because it's not a voice that's amplified through the media, or
mhm,
even social media.
mhm,
Um, yeah.
mhm,
I mean, the fact that you have begun or, started this organization as a microphone for that group is, certainly, you're like the liaison between those, those haves and have-nots in a huge sense.
Yeah. And I have come to believe very strongly that we're not doing them any favors. That I think that the immigrant community is bringing some wonderful things into our midst and into our culture. You know, um, uh, Values such as very strong family values, very very strong spiritual values, a generosity of spirit, humility. Uh, Things that are kind of lacking in mainstream American culture, were it not for these lovely influences, that our immigrant community is bringing to us and modeling for us. So I've come to appreciate them very much, as well as just the basic, very hard basic work that they do in our societies and our communities that's often undervalued and underappreciated. The caregiving, the food production, uh, the the just basic cleaning, maintenance, very humble kinds of work that they do that often gets overlooked and is not appreciated. Uh,
So,
Well, we have some beautiful partnerships with churches and temples, and it all started with Father Tom, who gave us our first home in the old convent building at Our Lady of the
mm,
Assumption Church when he was pastor there. I was looking, I didn't have any money to start the organization, and I was looking
mhm,
for a place, to begin the work. And
mm,
Tom offered the space, and then that became our home for the first 13 years of our organization's existence. And we developed programming together, and we still have that relationship, even though we're no longer physically at
mm,
Our Lady of the Assumption Church. We
mm,
still do things with them, as well as our current landlord is the Methodist Church here in town. So we're on their property now, but we also have a very strong relationships with the Presbyterian Church, the Episcopal
mhm,
Church in Pomona, the temple, the Jewish
mhm.
temple in
good.
Pomona, and also an international Hindu spiritual group.
Very good.
Hmm.
Very
So
good.
it's those are
Truly
lovely.
interfaith with an Yeah, interfaith.
Yes, yes,
yeah,
exactly.
it's great.
Crossroads, run by Sister Terry Dodge here in town
Oh,
for
Yeah,
women coming out of prison. There's another partner.
excellent.
So yeah, it's really lovely to have those partnerships and relationships that strengthen and expand what we're able to do here. Yeah.
mhm,
Was raised in a Catholic family and Catholic schools, and uh, was very influenced by uh, the emphasis on serving others and sharing with those less fortunate and addressing human suffering. That's part of the faith. But then, when I became an adult, I lost that faith because I couldn't reconcile a world of human suffering with a loving God. So, I went for about 20 years, motivated by my compassion, for people that were suffering, but there wasn't an overt or conscious spiritual component. which was very painful because it's very painful, you know, to work in this world and to be constantly confronted with the mystery of human suffering
Mhm,
and not to have any answer for it. So,
mhm,
um, but then, you know, it was interesting because when I was in high school, I remember one time one of the nuns asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, you know, and I said, well, I think I want to be a theologian because that subject is infinite and I'll never get bored. You know, I'll never
Oh.
and and I think I was both right and wrong
Mhm,
in that answer, you know, and I think I was wrong because I think humanity hasn't really gained anything by trying to study or understand God intellectually. You know,
mhm,
it's just a fool's errand, you know. But I think I was right in that there is a knowing through the heart that is indeed infinite and has the potential to experience some tiny part of what God, you know, might be. And I wasn't aware of that at the time. I didn't know about that knowing of the heart, or I didn't know about it consciously. And I think it's something that's not valued in our culture. You know, we value the mind and the intellect, and we
right,
know things that are facts and that you can prove and that
mhm,
you can see, you know, you know, sure, you feel in your heart and you love, but those are just feelings, you know, those aren't,
mhm,
that's not real reality. That's not a way of knowing, you know. But you know, I've come to learn that actually, yes, it is a way of knowing, and it's a way of knowing things that your mind will never know and can never grasp or comprehend, you know. So I think you know, I was on to something there. And so as time went by, I became acquainted with that knowing of the heart, and that allowed me to reconcile um, the suffering in the world with a loving God, and to understand how those two things could coexist. Not to understand, but to experience. You know,
mhm,
because I can't say I understand any of these
mhm,
things. I don't understand God. I don't understand
mhm,
anything. But I have been able to experience in some small way that reconciliation. So
mhm.
one of my brothers was a journalist in Central America back in the 80s during the terrible times there of oh, well, you know, all of the
Yeah.
violence and
Mm,
and war and that was going on, and he risked his life to go and report on these stories, and he would be sitting in the little huts, you know, of the people in these villages whose teachers and priests and healers were all being murdered, you know, because they were considered a threat to the government. And they would have had, you know, family members killed and tortured, and it was just an unspeakably um, uh, terrible existence. And he said, you know, in their homes they would have a crucifix on the wall, and he said for the first time he understood the crucifix. He said that no other image of God would have made any sense in that context. uh, it had to be a suffering, tortured, dying God.
mhm,
And that, you know, has stuck with me as I've worked with those same communities who fled those conditions and come up to this country, but live with the nightmares and the memories and the trauma, you know, of those experiences. um,
mhm.
oh,
What is your brother's name?
Daniel. Mhm.
Daniel.
Minty.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, he's written a number of books. He's a wonderful writer, and
Mm.
yeah, and
Oh,
therapist now.
okay. The the original vision of Uncommon Good, when you were first getting started, it seemed to have a fairly narrow focus on lawyers.
Well,
uh, and
yeah.
and the particular need that you recognized for tapping into, shall we say, the goodwill and passions of lawyers that soon got, um, shall we say, squelched or starved out by the basic needs to pay off their debt.
Yeah. Well, my first organization, the Inner City Law Center in Skid Row, I ran that, created and ran that for 20 years. And Uncommon Good grew out of that because uh, the Inner City Law Center was a legal and social services organization for the homeless and for families living in slum housing. And I noticed two things, over the years. And one was that young people coming out of law school were no longer able to do the kind of work that I had done, to go into a, impoverished community and begin to serve, because they were shackled with so much debt because, the cost of an education had risen so high. And so I thought, that it was my generation's duty to reach a hand down to those, coming up who wanted to serve and help them be able to do what I had done. So that was the original one of the original concepts. The other was that, you know, I was one of the pioneers of slum housing litigation in this country, and we would win sometimes millions of dollars in damages for the tenants who had suffered in these slums. And I'd give all the money away and say, go live happily ever after. And they'd all go away. And then a few years later, they'd come back and they'd say, Nancy, will you help us? We're in another slum. And I'd say, well, what happened? And they would say, well, we lived off the money from the case, and then it ran out, and nobody had the education to get a job to keep the family above the poverty line. So back down they went. So at that point, we started putting some of that money into college funds, for the kids, but found that by the time the kids reached 18, they were not prepared for college, and they weren't, that the groundwork had not been done to, make college students out of them. So the other impetus for Uncommon Good was to start working with the children who are at risk of becoming the next generation of poor or homeless people, and really get them established in education, so that they could be successful. So those were the first two programs, the lawyer program and the education program. But then I started hearing from my friends in the medical clinics in the region saying, hey, Nancy, we have the same problem. Young people can't come and work in our clinics anymore because they owe too much money by the time they come out of medical school. So we expanded the program to include doctors. But I was able to do the lawyer program for about 10 years, but then I just couldn't raise the money for it anymore because, unfortunately, the legal profession has been vilified in this country, and made the bad guys, and so people did not understand why poor people needed a lawyer. They would say, well, I'm a middle class person, I can't afford a lawyer, what's a poor person need a lawyer for? And so they didn't understand how the law and lawyers were necessary to bring justice, to a community, as opposed to just charity, like we were talking about earlier. So there's a basic misunderstanding, a basic mistrust and fear of lawyers. And no, over time, it just became impossible to raise money, even from lawyers. Even lawyers didn't want to fund other lawyers. So I had to let that particular aspect of the program go, which kind of broke my heart, because those were my roots, in
Mhm.
working for justice through the legal system. And I know how important it is, and how lawyers really are the last resort of the poor, when everyone else spurns them and scorns them and ignores them. uh, you know um, uh, the lawyers can sometimes work miracles.
Mhm.
But that's not really understood, and legal aid as such has pretty much dead in this country now because of a lack of understanding and support for it, which is a real shame. So that's a long answer to your short question, Tom.
No, that's how would I say? That was the answer I was kind of fishing for. You developed it a little bit more than I had anticipated, and there's a lot to think about there.
Yeah.
Um, where do you see Uncommon Good moving over? I mean, obviously the COVID experience has been a transformative one, it would seem to me, for Uncommon Good. the way that you described it earlier, uh, we're obviously going to be facing more and more challenges. What do you see on the horizon? Or, well,
You know,
I won't say what my or was.
yeah. Um, I always just kind of chuckle inside when people ask me that question, Tom, because I have no idea. You know, I feel like the work, the work is led by the Holy Spirit or God or
Mhm.
whatever name you want to put onto that. And we just try and follow that lead as it arises. I never know in advance, you know. It's kind of like COVID every day here, we just never know what to expect,
Yeah.
but we just try and respond to the need if and how we can as it presents itself. And I don't know what that's going to be.
That is, in my experience, that has been your gift, that maybe we can begin to learn from, simply to be receptive to the challenges of the moment.
Yeah.
Susan has her hand up.
Okay. The question is for Nancy. For those who are hearing about the program in Claremont for the first time, because there are people who do not know about Uncommon Good and they want to get involved. How can people get involved? How can people, where can people find you? Just more of a plain and simple, how can people get involved if they'd like? How can they help to contribute to the wonderful facility, the wonderful place that Uncommon Good is?
Oh, thank you, Susan. Our website is very simple. It's just uncommongood.org, and that has a lot of information. But there are many, many ways that volunteers help us. One is with by mentoring a child. Mentoring is kind of the heart of what we do with the children and youth because it harnesses that transformational power of relationship, which is really just love, which is the most powerful force that you can bring to bear in someone's life. And so the definition of mentor is just someone who can have fun with a child and make a new friend and be a positive influence in their life. We also have volunteers that tutor children in specific subjects, children and youth. We have people that help us with the farm program. They'll come in and they'll help us prepare the food or package the food or give out the food. We always need that kind of help. Or even working on, some people like to garden, and helping with some of our farm plots. Other people might have fruit trees that bear more fruit than they can eat, and if that's the case, our farmers are happy to come out and glean the excess, and then
Mm,
the homeowner gets a tax write-off for the donation, and then
mm,
the food becomes part of the food bank. So that's another way people can help. And then I'm just a professional beggar. This whole thing runs because I just ask everyone for money. So if you aren't able to physically volunteer with us, but you could send us a few bucks,
mm,
that's what keeps us all going. So that would be very appreciated too.
mm.
And they can also buy gift certificates, am I right?
Yes, as you
Wow.
yourself have so generously done. So thank you.
It's
Yeah,
a
you
good
can
way
buy
to,
gift certificates because part of what we grow, we sell to the community
Mhm.
because our funders want us to kind of, not beg for every last dime, but kind of pull ourselves up by our little bootstraps by selling carrots. So the food that we sell is actually the best possible food you can eat because it's grown locally, picked fresh that morning. We don't use any chemicals, not even the ones the government lets organic farmers use. So
Mm.
it's completely pure,
Wow.
alive food that we put right into our walk-in cooler, so it's not dying on a farmer's market table or a supermarket
Wow.
shelf,
Mm.
and can be on your plate that night, full of life and
Great.
energy. So it
Mm.
is great. I buy all my food from here because I know it's the best possible food I could possibly get for my family. So that's available to people from the community who are health
Mm.
conscious about their food and want their food dollar to go to a good cause, because then the money helps us educate kids and feed the hungry. So it's a nice, I call it a um, quadruple bottom line, because you know how businesses have the bottom line of needing to make some money. Well, okay, we do that. We sell the carrots, we make some money. But then our second bottom line is that I take care of the workers. I pay a living wage. I pay full health benefits for the
Wow,
farmers and their families.
that's
Um,
great.
the third bottom line is the community. We take care of the community by feeding the hungry. And then the fourth bottom line is that we're caring for the earth by using organic farming methods and water wise, irrigation methods, so it's a win, 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 so it's a lovely way to incorporate kind of justice values in just in your own food and meal preparation, if you're local here.
And if I'm not mistaken, if you have like a large area of land that's not being, or even a smaller medium area of dirt and land that can be used for your services in that of planting. Well, you explained that. If I had a whole area that you could plant fruits and vegetables, you would be able to do so, correct?
No, because of the cost of labor, because I pay my
Oh,
farmers a living wage and benefits for their families, I can't afford to hire any more farmers. So we're maxed out in terms of the land
oh,
that we can cultivate. But
okay.
yeah, um, I wish I had the ability to hire more farmers, because there are a lot of people who would like to offer us land, but we just at this point we can't take it. But we do deliver food too, like in the Claremont area. So if you're not able
Wow.
to come to the office here, in the hours that we're open, we deliver, and every day, every morning, we post online what's coming off the farms that day. So if you're wondering, oh, do they have tomatoes or what's in season, you can go look and kind of decide if you want to order something on our website. So yeah, a very practical way
Do
to
you pop
support the
that
work.
up on your Facebook page on a daily basis?
Not on our Facebook page, on our website. Yeah.
Are the vegetables available over at the Methodist Center? Is that where you sell them?
Yes, at our office at the Methodist Church, right next to the School of Theology. Yeah.
Right, right. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm coming.
Great, great. I look forward to
Good.
seeing you here.
Good.
Our one last thing, our building is a first of its kind in the world, green building, which we built by hand using just the earth on the site, with the children and the parents and the grandparents in our program. And we've had visitors from every continent come just to see the building because it's so unique. In fact, it's I think it's hilarious, but it has its own name in China because it's a very famous building in China. We've had so many visitors from there.
Wow.
So yeah, you should come just to see the building. We'll give you a little tour if you like.
I will. I will.
Okay.
And Nancy, do you still have the healing session once a month? I want to call it the healing session.
Oh yeah, the energy healing sessions. Well, we're about to start them up again. So we'll be doing that, and yeah, if you're interested, I can let you know. It'll probably be appointment only, just because of COVID safety stuff and all. But yeah, that's definitely in the works. So.